Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your second annual Conite 3 Scary Stories for Halloween. We're going to have 3 scary stories tonight again. I hope you enjoy. What would you do if something unexplainable kept happening to you in your day-to-day life? Find out what you would do in this situation by thinking about it in your head during this next story, entitled Something Strange Kept Happening to Me in My Day-to-Day Life. So there was this young man. That's a good way to put it. He was a young man. He would like to enjoy a breakfast every morning, as you should. And he would always make waffles in the toaster. And by make, I mean he would heat them up, frozen waffles. It's not your only option, but that's what he would do. He would toast the frozen waffles, and he would always wait there. And he would wait there, and he'd wait there, and he'd watch. And then they'd pop right up. He'd take them out, butter them up, and then he'd eat them every morning. Not the healthiest breakfast, but it is a breakfast. And then one day, he thought to himself, why am I sitting here for no reason watching these waffles, when I instead could be completing the rest of my morning routine while the waffles are toasting? Now you and I might normally think that is a logical thought process. But boy, was that a mistake. Because the next morning, when he goes and he puts the waffle in the toaster, and for the first time, he goes and he walks off to do something else. To do the rest of his routine, he starts packing up his belongings, preparing for his day. He hears the ding eventually. He comes back, and there is peanut butter all over the waffles in the toaster. It's an absolute mess. I mean, the waffles are popped out to the top, but there's peanut butter just all up, gunked up in the toaster. And now that it's toasted a bit, it's messed up. It's a horrible mess. And so he takes the waffles out, is extremely confused, and he's wondering if he's losing his mind, if he did that somehow and didn't remember. And then he takes the waffles out, doesn't have time to clean the toaster because he's going to be late to work if he does that. You can't just clean out a whole toaster before work when you're already planning the amount of time that you need to get there. So he eats the waffles with peanut butter, goes to work, goes through his day, tries to, take his mind off it, but he just keeps circling back to that same thing. How was there peanut butter on those waffles? And so when he comes home, he goes and he checks his peanut butter, and he doesn't notice anything about it that seems different. He doesn't remember what it looked like before, but he puts it back, and he goes, finishes up his day, goes to sleep. Next morning, he's going down the stairs, he's thinking about the waffle, and he's worried. And he goes through, and he forgot to clean the toaster last night, so he ends up putting the waffles in the microwave instead. Puts the waffles in the microwave. Miserable meal. You need to at least toast them, but he had no choice. He completely forgot to clean the toaster because he didn't have time yesterday. So he puts those waffles in the microwave, and then he goes to finish his stuff and gets ready and all that. He comes back, and in the microwave, full of peanut butter all over the place. There's peanut butter all over those waffles. And he takes them out, and now he knows something is wrong. He's wondering, is there an intruder? Somebody messing with me? What is going on here? He again thinks, am I potentially losing my mind? So then he takes the waffles out of the microwave, and then he just, he eats them. He eats them and is super freaked out. He doesn't even want to come home. Like he goes to work and he just is thinking the whole time, like he's dreading going back home because he's so worried about what's going to happen next. And he eventually goes home. He, is so stressed out about this. He's worrying himself sick. He goes to sleep. He wakes up and just this sense of dread. He just feels it so strong in his chest. He goes downstairs, he gets his waffles out of the freezer, and then he turns around, he starts walking to the toaster, forgets that he didn't clean the toaster yesterday or 2 days ago, and he also then thinks, oh, well, I'll do the microwave thing again. Then he remembers, I didn't clean the peanut butter out of the microwave. So you know what he does? He takes those waffles and he eats them raw. Our next story asks you a question about your own perspective. How far would you be willing to go to learn a skill that you've always wanted to learn? You'll be thinking about that in our next story, entitled, How Far Was I Willing to Go? To learn something I've always wanted to learn. So there was an old man near the end of his life. He didn't have much time left. Less than 10 years, that's for sure. And he has always wanted to get better at table tennis, but he was just stuck. He was so stuck at a low level of skill, and he couldn't get better. No matter how much he tried, no matter how much he played, he was always the worst guy at the table tennis area in any gym that he ever went to. Everyone would clown on him. They'd be doing trick shots as he's getting owned over and over. And so he just keeps thinking, man, I really wish, I really wish I was better at table tennis. But how far was this old man willing to go? You might be wondering that right now. If you're thinking about yourself, how far would you be willing to go to get better at table tennis or whatever skill that you particularly care about? So he decides he's going to contact a darker power, a dark, deep power from deep, dark below. He goes to the library and he asks the librarian, do you have any books about summoning dark powers? And then she says, we don't have that type of book in the library, but if we did have something like that, it would be in this section. And she tells him, I'm not going to tell you so that you don't follow these footsteps, but he goes to this section, he's looking through, searching through. Oh, this isn't what I want. And then up high, he sees huge, thick book, dusty as hell. Then he's looking around for one of those ladders that you climb up, and he eventually finds one. Creaky wheels, moves it over, lines up the ladder right below the book, climbs the ladder one step at a time. Boom, boom, boom. Those are his footfalls on the ladder. It's a little wobbly, even though it's holding onto the shelf. Steps creaking as he goes up. And he grabs the book. And it's so dusty, he inhales and starts coughing. And he reads the book. Well, he doesn't read the book yet. He goes down the ladder. And he opens the book. And then he starts reading it. He's looking at the index. And he's looking through the different chapters. And he can't read any of it because it's not written in English. So that really throws a wrench in his plans. So then he decides that he needs to learn the language that this book is written in. So he goes home and he learns Indonesian. And he has a much easier time learning Indonesian than he did when he tried to learn Spanish, because the verb tenses are easier to understand. Then once he learned Indonesian, he went back to the library. He went back to the same section with the dusty book, and now it's been a while. He goes back to that section, and the book is completely gone. It's nowhere to be found. It's an empty hole where that book was. And then he thinks to himself, well, I wanted to get better at tennis, table tennis. But in doing so, I learned a whole new language. Let that one sink in. Congratulations on making it this far. For our last story of the night, it just might test your patience. Just might test your patience. This last story's title is The Great Escape and the Great Reveal. So there was a young person of indeterminate gender, and they were in a situation that might be familiar, something that you've been in, and they came upon a realization. The realization went as follows. I am now in a situation in where I will never be in situations that I've been in the past again. And then they thought about that, and they thought, some of the things that I've experienced, I'll never be able to experience again. And they thought about this a lot. It was weighing on their mind. You know, they really went back through their memory catalog, and they thought about how there was this big new thing that happened, and when it happened, everyone was, locally around it, everyone was super hyped up and excited, and as that happened, they themselves were really excited as well, and they were, a big part of the thing that had happened. And this thing, it was huge when it happened, but only for that local zone. People would show up, they would interact with the occurrence, and then they'd go home, and it wouldn't be something they'd think about much, but it stayed this way for maybe a year and a half, that anytime people would show up at this location, everyone would be hyped, and they'd be learning new things about this situation, and they would be interacting with it in new ways, and then it was very enjoyable. Every time, this person, they learned a bit more, they got a bit better, they got a bit more experienced, and then one day, like that, it just, no one was interested anymore, except for this person. No one else cared. No one else was hyped. It was dead to everyone else. It didn't go out with a bang. It went out with silence. It just dropped off, and no one cared anymore. And this was the only person who still did. And they remembered what it was like when everyone did. They remembered what it was like when it was new and when people cared. And there's still, much interaction to be done. There's still things to discover, to explore, and there's much fun still to be had, but it never will be. And that's something that this person realized they need to be able to accept, and they need to be able to move on. And I think we all need to. We all need to realize that these situations that we've had will not always pan out. They will not always be there forever. And part of that means that we need to enjoy the times that we have, but we also need to let them go when they're done. Thank you for listening to these scary stories. If you enjoyed these stories, feel free to subscribe to the channel for more scary stories just like these once per year in a video like this. Happy